Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today is the 5th of September 2016. So as most people will be aware, the G20 summits are taking place and a lot of activity is happening over in China. And I'll just start off with a couple of articles from Zero Hedge before we get going into what the main topic is going to be around this video. So President Duterte is back in the headlines in the West, and he's been quoted to have said this, quote, "Who is he to confront me?" End quote. Philippines president unloads on, quote, "son of a bitch," end quote, Barack Obama. What was an embarrassing weekend for President Barack Obama, who arrived at the G20 summit in China, was a case study in diplomatic humiliation. Just turned even worse when on Monday, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte warned the US President not to question him about extrajudicial killings, or, quote, "son of a bitch, I'll swear at you," end quote, when the two presidents meet at the summit in Laos in the coming days. The topic of Duterte's killing spree, supposedly involving mostly criminals and drug traffickers, without due process, has raised eyebrows, most recently by the United Nations, which urged the Philippines to stop executing and killing people linked to drug business, and threatened that, quote, "state actors," end quote, could be punished. As a result, 2 weeks ago, Duterte lashed out at the UN and threatened that the country could leave the UN, quote, "maybe we'll just have to decide to separate from the United Nations. If you're that rude, son of a bitch, we'll just leave you," end quote, Duterte told reporters in Davao. Quoted by Bloomberg, quote, "I don't give a shit about them," end quote, he added, quote, "they are the ones interfering. You do not just go out and give a shitting statement against a country," end quote. Fast forward to today, when the outspoken president lobbied a preemptive warning at Obama, and before flying to Laos, where the two heads of state are set to meet, said that he is a leader of a sovereign country and is answerable only to the Filipino people. He was answering a reporter's question about how he intends to explain extrajudicial killings to Obama. More than 2,000 suspected drug pushers and users have been killed since Duterte launched a war on drugs after taking office on June 30th. It continues on a bit, but we'll stop there. And for those of you who aren't aware of the embarrassment that happened to the Air Force One and President Obama when they landed in China on the 3rd of September, here's just a quick recap. Tarmac alterations erupts after Obama lands in China. Officials shout, quote, "this is our country, our airport," end quote. Upon arrival on Saturday in China as part of his last visit to Asia as US Commander-in-Chief for the periodic photo op that is the G20 meeting, something unexpected happened. A very undiplomatic greeting when an unusual tarmac altercation involving Chinese and US officials, including National Security Advisor Susan Rice, devolved into a shouting match by a member of the Chinese delegation. It all started when the actual landing, as AP reports, the first sign of trouble is that there was no staircase for Obama to exit the plane or descend onto the red carpet. So as the photo below shows, Obama used an alternate exit. Needless to say, a diplomatic fuck-up of such as this one was not accidental. Beijing was sending a loud and clear message. Barack Obama arrives at Air Force One at Hangzhou International Airport in Hangzhou in eastern China's Shengjing province on September the 3rd for the G20 summit. Then, around the time that Obama was exiting through the emergency staircase, a Chinese official began shouting at White House staff after the travelling American press contingent was brought onto the tarmac. The Chinese official was attempting to block Rice and Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes after they lifted a blue rope holding back press and walked to the other side of it, closer to Obama. As Reuters adds, a Chinese official attempted to prevent National Security Advisor Susan Rice from walking to the motorcade as she crossed a media rope line. Speaking angrily to her before a Secret Service agent stepped between the two, Rice responded, but her comments were inaudible to the reporters standing underneath the wing of Air Force One. It was unclear if the official, whose name was not immediately clear, knew that Rice was a senior official and not a reporter. Then, according to Politico, the press pool was brought under the wing of Air Force One, where the pool was supposedly to stay behind the blue rope. However, a member of the Chinese delegation began shouting at White House staff, demanding the pool leave the arrival scene. A White House official said Obama was our president and Air Force One was our plane, and that the press was not going to move from this designated area. The Chinese official angrily responded, quote, "This is our country, this is our airport," end quote. And the video just copies that statement. Quote, "They did things that weren't anticipated," end quote, Rice told reporters afterwards. However, the disagreements between Chinese and American officials did not just stay on the tarmac. At Westlake Steakhouse, where the summit was being held, a group of the White House staff arriving before Obama was stopped at the security checkpoint. A heated argument between Chinese officials and White House staff, protocol officers and Secret Service who were trying to enter the building separately from the press, broke out at the security gate. According to the pool report, US officials could be heard arguing in Chinese with Chinese officials over how many White House officials were allowed to be in the building before Obama's arrival and which US officials were on the security list. It goes on to say, quote, "You don't push people, no one gives you the right to touch or push anyone around," end quote, yelled a Chinese security official. And then another quote, "Stop, please," said a foreign minister official in Chinese, quote, "There are reporters here," end quote. So basically it just goes on. But this is not a smooth operation for the White House team to deal with, and obviously quite amusing if you were watching this as a fly on the wall. Anyway, it does say this was a clear message that obviously relations aren't very good between China and America. Now back on topic with what this video is really about. So this is from Sputnik News. Philippines gravely concerned China is starting to invade Scarborough Shoal. Now Scarborough Shoal has been on and off the news for a couple of years. There's been a huge debate over a lot of the islands off the coast of the Philippines. Now I'll go on to read, this was published today on the 5th. The Philippines demanded an explanation from China's ambassador over the quote increasing number end quote of Chinese military vessels near the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. Earlier this year, the Obama administration issued a quote red line end quote declaration to China warning that there would be severe consequences if Beijing sought to reclaim Scarborough Shoal from the Philippines, despite a number of defense analysts predicting that Jinping's government planned to do just that in the heat of the US election season when politics would be placed above international affairs. The disputed shoal sits at the heart of South China Sea territorial dispute between China and the Philippines, who sought a declaration from the Hague International Tribunal to invalidate Beijing's long-standing claim to the territory and much of the surrounding waters. The basis of the decision, in large part, was Manila's control of the shoal, and the decision, which China has denounced, would rip waters from Beijing's control, through which 40% of the world's shipborne trade transits through. On Sunday, the Philippines rang the alarm over what they perceived as a move by China to begin the process of reclaiming the shoal while the world is distracted with the G20 summit after Filipino surveillance aircraft spotted an increase in number of Chinese vessels, much more than Beijing has maintained since seizing the shoal after a 2012 standoff, according to the Philippine Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana. Quote, "There were 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships and 6 other vessels, including blue-coloured barges around Scarborough Shoal," end quote. He said in a text message to reporters, quote, "The presence of many ships other than Coast Guard in the area is a cause of grave concern," end quote. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has demanded that China abide by the International Tribunal ruling, also said that he would not raise the issue during the G20 summit. The bombastic Filipino leader has said that if China were to invade the shoal, that his country was prepared to engage in a quote bloody conflict end quote against the Chinese in order to secure his country's sovereignty. I'm just going to stop there, guys, because what people should now be picking up about President Rodrigo Duterte is when he says something, he means it. Unlike a lot of the people in the West who fearmonger, who put out propaganda, who say one thing but never follow through with it. This guy follows through with what he says and does not give a shit about anybody's opinions, views regarding that, as long as he believes it's in the interest for the Filipinos. Okay, carrying on. If the Philippines were to engage in an armed conflict against China, then the United States would immediately be drawn into the conflict pursuant to the Mutual Defense Treaty signed by the two countries nearly 6 decades ago, considerably raising the stakes over what is actually nothing more than a few rocks that are sticking up out of the Pacific Ocean waters. Now I'll just stop there. Again, this particular few bits of rock sticking out of the ground in the water is not just a few rocks. It is an extremely strategical location. I will go on to show you why shortly, but this is also a stance of a new president trying to assert his dominance to other nations in his area. It's like that saying, if you're a doormat, people will walk all over you. The first time you let it happen, everybody will walk over you. And as we know, President Duterte has very strong opinions about what he believes is right. So carrying on, Lorenzana expressed his grave concern over the build-up of Chinese ships, but also urged caution. Quote, "We don't know yet if those barges are precursors of future dredging operations," end quote, he said. Quote, "If they try to construct anything in Scarborough, it will have a far-reaching adverse effect on the security situation," end quote. And that is why it's not just a bunch of rocks. And you'll see what Scarborough Islands is all about. The US State Department said on Sunday that the United States continues to monitor the escalating situation in the South China Sea and encouraged, quote, "all sides to exercise restraint and take practical steps to lower tensions," end quote. So that's the end of that article. And you've got a huge political implication in this little corner of the world. And that is why I'm covering the stories that crop up regarding President Duterte, the Philippines, China and the US, because we know that the US have a lot of military bases, not only just all over the world, but dotted throughout the Pacific region. And with heightened tensions between China, Russia, the US, the UN, and now this President Duterte trying to make his stance as a dominant force in his region. He's not the sort of guy that's going to take any shit from anybody regardless of who they are and what armies are backing them. Now, by the looks of things, obviously President Duterte is continuing the legal action through The Hague and trying to get that enforced legally through all the diplomatic channels, even though he's not the most outwardly spoken diplomatic president ever to exist. Nonetheless, he's the one in power in the Philippines. But what is the conflicting issue is the tensions between the US and the Chinese and the Russians. And there's quite a lot of coverage in other videos and channels regarding what the next World War III would look like and who are going to be the main players and who are going to be making this all happen. And it's obviously pure speculation. However, the way that I see it is that President Duterte has no respect for the American counterpart, Obama, which is totally understandable because I don't think anybody respects that guy anymore. He is just a puppet for the establishment and apparently is not even a legal person to be holding that position. But that's another topic. But what this will all boil down to is President Duterte and President Obama don't get on. From the diplomatic point of view of the American stance in the Pacific, I believe that they will go along and do what they have to do to keep their bases in position, but also via their legal agreements with the joining of the military in that area, the US will have legal right to help defend those islands should they feel that the Chinese are pushing in on territory which isn't their own and has already been ruled by The Hague that it's not theirs. However, in the Chinese opinion, it's theirs. So they're going in and locking down the area with military force. Now the Chinese military force massively outweighs the Philippine force. Navy, army, air force, everything. Which is why the Philippines would need the American backup should they actually take it that far and they need to regain by force. And we all know that the American will have no questions about engaging in what they class democracy. And that is just one way that this could be the spark that would ignite a huge conflict, which then in turn drags in all the other nations for all the different sides, which effectively is all being fought over what? A bunch of rocks coming out of the ground in the middle of the ocean. So it's like, but what is going to happen is the Chinese are going to move in, and they've already moved into a lot of the other islands, as I will go on to show shortly, and set up various military establishments. And the more of a perimeter the Chinese can set up off the coast of China, the more chance they have of early warning detections and early warning first defences against any strike that will be coming either from naval, air, into the state of China. Because unfortunately for China and Russia, they are totally encircled by UN and Western forces, mainly American bases, UN bases, which can't be a very nice feeling, which is purely a self-defense mode for China to set up a perimeter around the coastal line.